Level 1, the microparts handler. A luxury watch sits quietly on someone's wrist. It does not roar. It does not flash. It does not need to explain itself. One small movement of the hand, one glimpse of polished metal under a sleeve, and suddenly it can suggest status, patience, taste, money, history, and control. But you do not enter the luxury watch factory through a boutique window. You enter through the parts room. The air is silent, clean, and cold. White lights shine down on small trays lined across pale work tables. Inside them are screws smaller than crumbs, tiny gears with teeth you can barely count, springs thinner than hair, polished hands, rubber gaskets, sapphire crystals, cases wrapped in protective film, and dials resting under clear covers. Your first job is not glamorous. You receive the parts, sort them, check them, move them to the correct tray. Keep the wheels away from the screws, keep the hands protected, keep the dials covered, keep every tiny component exactly where it belongs. A senior worker places a small gear in front of you with tweezers. It is so light it almost feels unreal. You lean closer under the lamp and notice how perfect it looks, until she tilts it slightly. A faint scratch catches the light, almost invisible. But in this factory, almost invisible is still visible. That small mark could travel forward into the movement, into the case, into the final inspection, into a watch someone may one day pay thousands of dollars to wear. You place the gear into the reject tray. At level 1, the luxury watch is not luxury yet. It is not status, it is not a story, it is just fragile parts under white light, waiting for human hands steady enough not to ruin them. And as you sort the next tray, one question follows you deeper into the factory. How can something small enough to fit on your wrist carry this much pressure? Level 2, the dial and hands preparation worker. At level 2, the watch begins to have a face, not a soul, not a story, not yet, just a face. You leave the parts room and step into a quieter preparation area, where the work tables are brighter, cleaner, and almost painfully still. Every tray has a cover. Every tool has a place. Every movement feels smaller than it should. Nobody rushes here because rushing creates dust, slips, scratches, and mistakes that can ruin something before it ever reaches the movement. Your job is to prepare the dial and hands. The dial lies under a clear cover, flat and silent, waiting to become the part people will look at most. Around it are hands so thin they look like they could bend from a careless breath. Hour hand, minute hand, second hand, small markers, tiny decorative parts. Each piece is simple when seen alone, but together they create the first impression of value. A senior worker shows you how to lift a hand with tweezers. You expect it to feel easy. It does not. The metal is so light that your own hand feels too heavy. You lower it toward the tray, trying not to tilt, trying not to breathe too hard, trying not to let the tip touch anything it should not. Then you see a speck of dust on the dial. It is almost nothing. A point under the light, a tiny interruption on a surface that most people would still call perfect. But under magnification it becomes enormous. The senior worker removes the dial from the station and places it aside for cleaning. No debate. No shortcut. A luxury watch cannot begin its life with dust on its face. At level 1, you learned that luxury begins as fragile parts under white light. At level 2, you learn that appearance begins with discipline. Because the dial is not just decoration, it is the part that meets the owner every time they look down at their wrist. And the next level will take you beneath that face, into the hidden machine that decides whether the watch can actually keep time. Level 3, the movement assembly assistant. At level 3, you go beneath the face. The dial and hands may be what the owner sees, but here, inside the movement assembly room, the real pressure is hidden under bridges, wheels, screws, jewels, springs, and parts so small they seem impossible to trust. The room is almost silent. No loud machines, no conveyor belts, no shouting across a factory floor. Just lamps, magnifiers, padded benches, trays of parts, and the careful breathing of workers who know that one sudden movement can ruin hours of labor. Your job is to assist the watchmaker assembling the movement. You prepare trays, pass tools, check tiny components under magnification, keep dust covers closed, place screws where they can be reached without confusion. Watch as a senior watchmaker lowers a gear into position with tweezers so fine they look more like surgical tools than factory equipment. At first, the movement looks too small to carry much meaning. Then one wheel turns, a second wheel answers it, a third waits for the smallest push. The whole system begins to make sense, not as decoration, but as discipline. Every tooth must meet another tooth. Every bridge must hold without squeezing too hard. Every screw must be tightened enough to secure, but not so much that it damages what it is meant to protect. The senior watchmaker lets you place one tiny screw near the edge of the plate. Your hand feels enormous. You lower the tool slowly. The screw catches, turns, settles, then the watchmaker stops you. Not more. You freeze. To you it feels unfinished. To her, one more turn could be too much. That is when you understand the strange violence of precision. You can destroy something valuable without force. You can ruin it by applying just a little more pressure than it can accept. At level 2, you learn that appearance begins with discipline. At level 3, you learn that time begins with restraint. Because inside a luxury watch, power is not loud. It is controlled by pieces small enough to disappear, yet important enough to decide whether the watch lives or fails. And once the hidden movement begins to come together, the next level brings you back to the outside, where polished metal must look effortless, even though one wrong touch can erase its value. Level 4, the case. Polishing worker. At level 4, you leave the hidden machine and return to the surface. The movement may decide whether the watch can keep time, but the case decides what people believe before they ever hear it tick. A luxury watch is judged first by light. How the edge catches it, how the bezel reflects it, how the side of the case curves into shadow, how one polished surface makes the whole object feel heavier than its size. You step into the polishing area and the silence changes. It is still controlled, still careful, but not as quiet as movement assembly. Small polishing wheels spin behind protective covers. Cloth buffs turn under soft lamps. Workers hold metal cases with a kind of pressure that looks gentle until you understand what is at risk. Your job is to assist the case polishing process. You prepare unfinished cases. Check protective film. Move polished pieces into clean trays. Watch the senior polisher work the side of a case against a rotating wheel with almost invisible control. The metal changes slowly. A dull surface becomes bright. A brushed edge becomes defined. A curve begins to carry light like water. At first, polishing feels like making something shiny. Then the senior polisher shows you a damaged sample. The case is bright, but wrong. One edge is softened too much. The line that should be sharp has disappeared. It still looks expensive to an untrained eye, but inside this factory, it has lost part of its shape. That is when you understand the danger. You can ruin luxury by removing too much. Not by breaking it. Not by scratching it. By making it smooth in the wrong place. By chasing shine until the design loses discipline. You hold an unfinished case under the lamp and turn it slowly. Every reflection reveals a decision. Every edge has to stay alive. At level 3, you learn that time begins with restraint. At level 4, you learn that beauty also requires restraint. Because luxury is not simply polish, it is knowing where to stop. And once the case is finished, the next level will seal the movement, the dial, the hands, the crystal, and every hidden risk into one object people will call complete. Level 5, the crystal and case assembly worker. At level 5, the watch begins to close around its secrets. Until now, everything has been exposed, the dial under a cover, the hands in their tray, the movement under magnification, the polished case turning slowly under light. Every part could still be inspected, adjusted, cleaned, corrected, rejected. But now those parts begin to come together. You step into the crystal and case assembly area, where the benches are clean enough to make you nervous. Sapphire crystals rest in soft trays. Rubber gaskets sit in tiny circles. Casebacks are lined up beside polished cases. Tools for pressing, sealing, and fitting are arranged with surgical order. Your job is to help assemble the watch into its protected form. You prepare the case, check the gasket, inspect the crystal edge. Hold the watch body steady while a senior assembler lowers the dial and movement into place. The whole process feels slower than it should because once the case is sealed, every hidden mistake becomes harder to reach. A small particle of dust appears near the edge of the dial. The senior assembler stops immediately. No one argues, no one says it is too small. In this room, a speck of dust is not small. It is trapped evidence. If it stays inside the case, it may sit there for years beneath the crystal, waiting for the owner to notice it under sunlight. The part is removed, cleaned, inspected again. Then comes the crystal. Clear. Hard, perfectly smooth. It looks simple, but the pressure has to be right. Too weak, and the seal may fail. Too strong, and something can crack, shift, or stress the case. The gasket must sit correctly. The crystal must seat evenly. The caseback must close without forcing the movement inside to suffer. When the watch finally closes, it looks more complete than anything you have touched so far. But you know better now. Complete does not mean proven. At level 4, you learn that beauty requires restraint. At level 5, you learn that assembly creates trust, or traps mistakes forever. Because the moment the watch is sealed, it begins carrying everything that came before it. And the next level will ask the question every luxury watch must answer before it deserves to leave the bench. Can it actually keep time? Level 6. The accuracy testing operator. At level 6, the watch is already beautiful. That is why the testing room feels so unforgiving. The case is polished, the crystal is sealed, the dial is clean, the hands are in place. Under normal light, it looks like something ready for a boutique window, ready for a wrist, ready to become part of someone's identity. But in this room, beauty does not matter yet. Accuracy does. You step into a quiet testing area where finished watches sit in small holders under controlled light. Some are lying flat, some stand upright, some are turned at angles that feel strange at first, until a senior technician explains why. A watch does not live only on a table. It lives on a wrist. It moves through gravity, temperature, motion, and time. Your job is to help test how the watch behaves. You place one watch into a timing machine and close the holder gently. The device listens to the movement. Not with ears exactly, but with sensors that detect the rhythm inside the case, the tiny beat of mechanical parts trying to divide time into reliable pieces. A graph appears on the screen. You do not need to read the numbers to feel the tension. The senior technician leans closer. The line is not terrible. It is not a failure that announces itself, but it is not stable enough. In one position, the watch runs slightly fast. In another, slightly slow. The difference is small, but luxury is built inside small differences. You look down at the watch. It still shines. It still feels expensive. It still looks like something people might admire. But if it cannot keep time with discipline, the shine is decoration hiding weakness. The technician marks it for adjustment. At level 5, you learn that assembly creates trust, or traps mistakes forever. At level 6, you learn that beauty must answer to time. Because a luxury watch is not expensive only because it looks perfect. It is expensive because someone expects perfection to continue, second after second, long after the factory lights are gone. And once the watch proves whether it can keep time, the next level will test whether it can survive the world outside the quiet room. Level 7, the water resistance and durability tester. At level 7, the watch leaves the quiet idea of luxury and enters the reality of use. Until now, everything has happened under soft lamps, clean trays, magnifiers, and careful hands. The watch has been protected from dust, pressure, scratches, and careless movement. It has been treated like something delicate enough to deserve silence. But the person who buys it will not keep it under a lamp. they will wear it. They will walk through rain, wash their hands, sweat under a shirt cuff, knock it lightly against a desk, step from cold air into heat, move their wrist hundreds of times a day without thinking about what is happening inside the case. So the factory has to think about it for them. You enter the durability testing room and the atmosphere feels colder, more technical. There are pressure chambers, ceiling testers, vibration machines, water trays, thermal cabinets, and small holders where watches are locked into place like evidence. Your job is to help test whether the watch can survive the outside world. A senior technician places one finished watch into a pressure test chamber. The case looks calm under the glass dome. Polished, expensive, almost too refined to be treated like equipment. Then the test begins. The machine hums softly. Pressure rises. You watch the technician's face instead of the watch because the watch itself reveals nothing at first. No drama. No movement. Just a sealed object being quietly challenged. When the chamber opens, the watch is inspected again. Crystal edge, case back, crown, gasket, no visible issue. Then it goes into another station, a light vibration test, a controlled water exposure, a temperature change. Each test seems small compared to the price of the watch, but that is exactly why it matters. Luxury cannot only look perfect in a box, it must stay trustworthy on a wrist. Then one unit is flagged, not broken, not flooded, not destroyed. Just a tiny sealing concern near the crown area. The technician does not shrug. The watch is pulled from the line and marked for deeper inspection. At level 6, you learn that beauty must answer to time. At level 7, you learn that luxury must answer to life. Because outside the factory, a watch is not protected by white gloves. It is protected only by how well everyone inside this building did their work. And once the watch survives pressure, water, vibration, and temperature, there is still one final human judgment before it can leave the factory. Level 8, the final quality inspector. At level 8, the watch looks ready to leave. That is exactly why your job becomes harder. The case has been polished, the crystal is sealed, the dial is clean, the hands are aligned, the movement has been tested for accuracy, the watch has survived pressure, water resistance checks, vibration, and temperature changes. To almost anyone else, it already looks finished. But final inspection is not about almost anyone. You sit at a white inspection table under a strong lamp, wearing gloves that make every movement feel formal. The finished watch rests on a soft tray in front of you. It is small, silent, and expensive-looking in a way that makes the room feel even quieter. Your job is to search for reasons to stop it. You check the dial first. No dust under the crystal, no mark near the indices, no hand sitting too low, no second hand slightly bent. Then you tilt the case and let the light move across the metal. The polished edge catches cleanly. The brushed surface stays even. The case back closes smoothly. The crown sits straight. Then you turn the watch again. A tiny mark appears near the lug. Not a deep scratch. Not obvious, not something most people would see in the first second. But under the inspection light, it becomes impossible to ignore. You pause. This is the final gate. Behind you are hours of handling, assembly, polishing, testing, and correction. Ahead is the boutique, the box, the buyer, the wrist, the moment someone opens the package and believes they are holding perfection. You mark the watch for review. The decision feels heavier than the watch itself. At level 7, you learn that luxury must answer to life. At level 8, you learn that perfection is not a feeling. It is a standard someone has to defend. Because a luxury watch does not leave the factory because it looks beautiful from far away. It leaves only when it survives the closest possible look. And once you understand how hard it is to approve one watch, the next level asks whether you can manage an entire workshop where every second, every surface, and every mistake has a cost. Level 9. The Workshop Production Manager. At level 9, you stop inspecting one watch. Now the entire workshop is your responsibility. You stand near the glass wall overlooking the production floor. and the room below is almost too quiet to feel like a factory. There are no huge machines shaking the ground, no sparks, no shouting, no assembly line racing forward. Instead, there are watchmakers bent over benches, polishers turning metal under lamps, technicians moving sealed cases into testing rooms, and final inspectors holding finished watches under white light. Everything looks calm. That is what makes the pressure harder to explain. Your job is to manage the workshop without destroying the reason it exists. The first delay comes from movement assembly. One batch of tiny components needs rechecking before it can move forward. Then polishing reports that several cases require extra finishing time because the edges must remain sharp. Accuracy testing has watches waiting for adjustment. Final inspection has stopped 3 finished units for marks so small most people would never notice. From the outside, it sounds inefficient. From inside the workshop, it sounds honest. A planning manager asks whether the team can speed up final inspection for the next delivery window. The boutique schedule is tight. The launch date has already been promised. Customers are waiting. Retail partners are asking for numbers. You look across the floor. A young worker in the parts room handles screws smaller than dust. A watchmaker adjusts a movement under magnification. A polisher stops before a case loses its edge. An inspector rejects a watch that still looks perfect from 5 steps away. You know what faster really means? Faster means fewer pauses, fewer second looks, fewer uncomfortable rejections, fewer chances for someone to say, "This is not ready." So you refuse to rush the final gate. The schedule gets worse. The watches get better. At level 8, you learn that perfection is not a feeling. It is a standard someone has to defend. At level 9, you learn that luxury is managed slowness. Because in a luxury watch factory, speed can become a hidden defect. The product is not valuable only because of metal, glass, gears, or branding. It is valuable because hundreds of people agreed not to pretend that almost perfect was enough. And above the workshop, there is one final level, where people no longer decide how a watch is made, but what desire should be allowed to cost. Level 10, the global luxury brand decision maker. At level 10, the watch is no longer only a product. It is a decision about desire. You sit inside a private brand conference room where the lighting is warmer than the workshop and the silence feels more expensive. On the table in front of you are several prototype watches resting under soft lamps. One has a new dial texture. One has a slightly different case shape. One has a color that marketing believes younger buyers will notice. Another is almost unchanged from a classic design, but that is exactly why collectors may want it. Around the table are designers, finance executives, production planners, marketing strategists, distribution managers, and senior brand leaders. Each person sees the watch differently. Design sees proportion. Production sees difficulty. Finance sees margin. Marketing sees story. Collectors see scarcity. And you have to see all of it at once. Your job is to decide which model becomes real, how many pieces will be made, how it will be priced, where it will be sold, and what story will surround it before anyone ever wears it. One proposal is tempting: increase the production run. More watches, more revenue, more boutiques satisfied, more customers able to buy instead of wait. The charts make it look reasonable. Demand is there. The market is hungry. The brand could move faster, but you remember the workshop. You remember the worker sorting screws smaller than crumbs. The dial rejected for a speck of dust. The movement screw that could not take one more turn. The case edge that disappeared when polished too far. The watch pulled from final inspection because of a mark near the lug. You know every extra piece is not just a number. It is more pressure on hands, eyes, tools, benches, testers, inspectors, and people trained to say no when almost perfect is not enough. If you produce too many, the watch may stop feeling rare. If you produce too few, the market becomes frustrated. If you tell the wrong story, the watch becomes metal and glass pretending to be meaning. If you chase demand too hard, luxury becomes volume wearing a nicer suit. The room waits. You approve the model. But not the aggressive production plan. You choose a controlled release. Fewer pieces. Slower rollout. More inspection time. More protection for the workshop. A story built around precision and patience, not hype. Some people at the table look disappointed. Others understand immediately. At level 9, you learned that luxury is managed slowness. At level 10, you learn that brand power is controlled scarcity. Because the highest level of a luxury watch factory is not only about making watches, it is about deciding how much time, craft, rarity, and desire the world is allowed to touch. You started with parts so small they could vanish under a lamp. Now you decide what time should cost. You began with a luxury watch sitting quietly on someone's wrist. Small, polished, silent, almost effortless. From the outside, it looked like status made physical. A clean case, a perfect dial, a smooth crystal, a few hands moving over a surface that seemed calm enough to hide everything behind it. But inside the factory, nothing felt effortless. At the lowest level, the watch was not luxury yet. It was screws smaller than crumbs, gears light enough to vanish, springs thinner than hair, crystals under covers, dials protected from dust, and trays handled with careful hands. One scratch, one misplaced part, one careless breath could send a mistake deeper into the system. Then the watch began to gain a face. The dial had to stay clean, the hands had to be protected. A speck of dust that most people would never notice became large enough to stop the work. Beneath that face, the movement came together piece by piece, and you learned that time does not begin with force. It begins with restraint. You saw how a screw could not take one more turn. You saw how a case could lose its value if polishing went too far. You saw how a crystal and gasket could seal trust into the watch, or trap a mistake inside forever. Then came the tests. The watch had to prove it could keep time. It had to survive pressure, water, vibration, temperature, and the ordinary life of a wrist outside the factory. It had to pass final inspection under a light strong enough to reveal what pride might want to ignore. And when you reached the management level, the factory became something even more delicate than the watch itself. A system of people trained to slow down. A system where almost perfect was not allowed to become good enough. At the highest level, the watch became more than metal, glass, gears, and branding. It became scarcity. It became desire. It became a decision about how much time, patience, craft, and status the world is allowed to touch. A luxury watch does not become valuable only because it tells time. It becomes valuable because so many people inside the factory refuse to let time be treated cheaply. You started with parts small enough to disappear under a lamp. Now you understand what they were really building, not just a watch, a controlled piece of time. If you want to see another hidden system from the bottom to the top, comment which factory, brand, or global production chain we should enter next. And subscribe for more stories from inside every level.